How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the House of Horror podcast. I'm not doing a pre-recorded intro to this show because this is going to be another one of my solo shows. So very exciting stuff on the episode today. Basically, I just wanted to do this as sort of a test run, to be quite honest with you guys, because I want to get better at doing these solo shows, and the only way to do that is to just do them. So that's what I'm going to do today. It's very hard doing these solo shows because you're consistently talking for the entire time, so I may need a little bit of a breather here and there in this episode, but that's besides the point. Just another couple housekeeping things. I don't know if this is going to be coming out during the House of Horror Marathon, or if this is going to be coming out as like a bonus episode after the fact, and that is mainly because, alright, I'm just going to be honest with you guys. I'm going to be really frank and honest with you guys about this. This year for the House of Horror, I did not have nearly as much free time as I did the previous year in 2019. And I know that's a little weird to say because, I mean, we've been going through a global pandemic. People have been quarantining. So a lot of people might be like, buddy, you should have had a lot more free time than normal to do these things. But for me, that wasn't really the case. I'm not going to dwell on this or go on and on and on about it. But mainly because I'm technically an essential worker, I was working basically more than I had in years past. I was pulling a lot of overtime. And besides that, I mean, just when I was home, just with everything going on in the world, I mean, I hit some pretty depressive moments there. And again, I'm not going to dwell on it too much. I mean, you got to do what you got to do. I'm just going to keep powering through. So basically, this episode may or may not be in the 31-day marathon, depending on how things go. But you're going to hear it at some point regardless, whether it's during the marathon or it's after as a bonus show or something like that. And I just wanted to do something really casual, off the cuff, not put too much thought into it. It is a crisp autumn morning today. The leaves are falling. Everything is gorgeous out. It's my absolute favorite time of the year. And what I just wanted to do today is just run through every horror film that I saw in 2020. Because not all of these films I can obviously focus on in an episode of the show because there wouldn't be enough slots to do it unless I'm doing like multiple videos a day. And it's really hard to edit these videos together and stuff. I mean, each video can take like a week or longer to do. So, I mean, the best way to just talk about all these films is to do them in a podcast, because with a podcast, there's really no editing involved, and if there is editing, it's very, very limited. I mean, it's just making a thumbnail and, you know, kind of cleaning things up here and there, taking out some of the awkward pauses here and there. But yeah, I just figured that this would be a fun episode to do and just run through some of these films for you guys. I'm basically just gonna go off of Letterboxd and look at all of the films that I watched and just see what I remember, see if they left a lasting impression on me, and just kind of talk about them a little bit. So at the recording of this podcast, these are all of the films that I've seen in 2020. Some of them are rewatches, some of them are films that I missed throughout the years, and some of them are actually new releases. I did get a few new releases in 2020, although there were very few because obviously theaters had been shut down. So we're going all the way back to January, and the first film that I saw this year that was in the spooky genre was the film Ready or Not. This was a 2019 film. I remember seeing tons of trailers about the film, and I didn't really think that it was gonna be the best. It was definitely one that I skipped out when it was in theaters. I don't know why. I mean, it just didn't really click with me. It wasn't something I was incredibly interested in. But when it came to home video, I was like, all right, I'll check it out. And this was back when there was a video store like right down the street from my house. It was a Family Video, which I actually worked at one of those when I was in college. But Family Videos were great. They always have a lot of cool stuff. I don't think there's many of them around anymore, especially after the shutdown, because ours shut down during the quarantine and everything. They sold off their entire stock. But while it was still open, I went in there and I rented Ready or Not and a couple other films. And yeah, I was actually pleasantly surprised with it. Again, I didn't think that I was really going to like it at all based on the trailers and stuff, which is why I skipped it. Basically, the plot involves a newly married couple who are forced to play a bunch of games on their wedding night. With the groom's family, it's a tradition. They always play games on the wedding night. And it just so happens that this time, the dice did not land in the favor of the bride, essentially, because it's a random process on what game they play, and it just happened to land on this one, and it basically turned into a fight to the death. Basically, the game was that the bride needed to survive the night. And if the bride did not survive the night and the family did not kill the bride, this curse was going to come, and it was basically going to kill the entire family. They were all going to burst into flames and die, or whatever it was. So it's a survival story. I mean, and it takes place in a house, so it's like a spooky mansion, and there's a lot of suspense in it. The bride's trying to survive. There's also a lot of humor in it as well. You don't know which family members to trust, because some of them are deceiving, some of them think that the whole game is bullshit, and it's just stupid, and there's actually nothing going to happen if the bride survives the night. The ending of the film is really great and crazy. I'm not going to spoil anything here, but it goes completely insane. I loved everything about it. It was hilarious. I gave the film 3 stars on Letterboxd, which is a pretty solid review. I guess to just sort of go through my Letterboxd reviews, the way I star rate things, because I haven't really talked about this before, and if you don't follow me on Letterboxd, there's a link down in the description to go ahead and do that. Basically, the way I score things on Letterboxd is anything that's under 3 stars, like 3 stars is the middle to me. Even though it's only out of 5, 2.5 would technically be the middle. So 2.5 means that I liked the film, but I probably wouldn't rewatch it. 3 means I liked the film and I would rewatch it. So those are basically the 2 middle slots. So if it's a 2.5 or under, I probably don't want to watch it again. But if it's above 3, like 3 and above, it means I would watch it again. And of course things vary. I mean, there's tons of films that I had to rank low just because it'd be disrespectful to rank them anything higher than that based on my rating scale, but I would watch them again. Like, I think that, like, I rated, like, crazy stuff like Birdemic as, like, 1 star, but, like, I would watch that again because it's just so hilarious. But that's besides the point. But I gave Ready or Not 3 stars. I thought it was a fun film. And you guys should definitely go check it out if given the opportunity to do so. The next film that I saw was Nightmare Cinema. This was actually a film that I rented with Ready or Not, and I had seen Nightmare Cinema sitting on the shelves at that Family Video probably for about a year or a year and a half, and it was a film that was always drawn to me because of the cover art. It has a really great cover art. There's like a demon on it with some film, I believe. It's just a really great artwork, and it really sold me on the film. But the problem was that the video store only had 1 copy of it, so a lot of times when I went in there, it wasn't there. And I was also waiting for it to sort of go on special, because with Family Video, when they do like their new releases, they do a rent 3, get 1 free after it's been in the store for a little bit. So once it gets that green sticker on it, it's eligible for the rent 3, get 1 free. So I did it with that. It was actually with Ready or Not, and a couple other films that I rented that day. They weren't horror films. Like, I think I rented like Jojo Rabbit and a couple other things that day. But the 2 horror films were Ready or Not and Nightmare Cinema. So, yeah, I was waiting for it for a while. Nightmare Cinema is an anthology film. I think it was released in 2018. And it was pretty wild. Like, it was very low budget, obviously. It was like an indie film. Maybe not like fully independent. Like, there were some like big names in it. Like Mickey Rourke was in it. That's the biggest name that was in it. Not saying he's like an A-list celebrity or anything like that, but there were a couple like familiar faces in there, I guess I want to say. So Mickey Rourke's in it. He plays like a projectionist, I believe. Sort of stringing all these films together. Sonny from, I forget his name. His name is like Maurice Bernard or something like that from General Hospital. He plays Sonny in it. And of course I knew him because my mom watches General Hospital every single day. So when I was a kid, Sonny was always kind of in the house with us. So and funny story. So I did not know he was going to be in the film when I was watching it. So I'm just sitting there and I'm laying on my couch watching this film and I hear his voice and I was in utter disbelief that he was in this film. Because the only other thing I saw him in besides General Hospital was that movie Joy, and it was a meta thing where he was also playing someone in a soap opera in that movie. So this is the first time I saw him not in a soap opera. He plays a priest in one of the stories, and there's like a bunch of Catholic schoolgirls being possessed by demons, and there's this crazy action scene I remember during it. Some of the other films that were in there, since it was an anthology, I remember there was like a slasher that took place in the woods. There was one about like a piano player that dies and then comes back. It sort of reminded me of like The Hands of Orlok. If you haven't seen my top 10 silent films from last year, go check that out to learn about The Hands of Orlok. Definitely gave me those vibes in there. There were a couple more shorts in there. I mean, nothing really too noticeable to talk about. I think Joe Dante directed some of the stuff in here. I'm not sure which one he did. Again, I just remember seeing his name in the credits. I'm not doing this scripted or anything. I'm not looking anything up. I'm just going what's off the top of my head. But I think Joe Dante was involved. But if he was not involved, let me know down in the comments. And yeah, I guess while I'm saying let me know down in the comments. If you guys haven't subscribed to the show, go ahead and subscribe to the show. It helps me out so much. And if you actually like this, like if you're enjoying what I'm saying, give me a thumbs up on this video if you're watching on YouTube. If you're on a streaming service, make sure you give me a 5-star rating. And let me know how I can improve these solo shows. Because I want to get better at them. And sometimes it's a hard task to get guests on the show. So doing solo shows might be something I want to do more regularly. So yeah, just give me any suggestions you can to help improve these. I mean, this one I don't think is going as bad as I thought it would be. But I mean, there's obviously things that I can improve upon with everything that I do. So I also gave Nightmare Cinema 3 stars on Letterboxd. Again, I'm just looking at my Letterboxd account. I gave it 3 stars. I don't know. I mean, maybe I would watch it again if I was in the right state of mind or with a good group of people to watch it with. I don't know if I'd watch it by myself again. But if people wanted to see it, it would be a fun time to watch again. The next film that I saw was actually the first horror film that I saw in theaters in 2020, Color Out of Space. And this one I saw with Midnight Miles, my illustrious wife, Beck Nasty, Emily, and I think our friend Adrian was with us as well to go see this film. Miles had been talking about it for a couple weeks leading up to the release. I hadn't heard about the film, but he had, because he was a big fan of the director, who had released some films like in the early 90s and sort of like lost his way with Hollywood. He didn't want to do films anymore or anything, and this was his big return to filmmaking, and he decided to adapt an H.P. Lovecraft story, which is Color Out of Space. So this was the first one I saw in theaters this year, as I mentioned. The other ones I had rented at home, the other 2. The basic plot of the story is Nick Cage and his family live in this secluded farm out in the woods. The daughter practices witchcraft. She does all these spells and stuff. And the family's just trying to get by. I mean, the wife is like a real estate agent or something like that. They have a son, and Nick Cage takes care of the farm. There's also a hermit that lives on the property, played by Cheech Marin, I believe. So he's hanging out at the farm. Everyone thinks he's crazy. His name is Ezra, I believe, and the only reason I remember that is because of Ezra Cook. So I think his name is Ezra. And basically this weird, unidentified, like, meteorite crash lands on the property, and it starts emitting this strange, like, purple color light that slowly starts to consume the place. The young boy is infatuated with it early on, and he makes a friend with the light, basically. And you just see it sort of slowly destroy the family. It's a really good film. I really ended up liking it. I gave it 3.5 on Letterboxd, which is actually a high rating for me. Most films I rank like 3 or 2.5, like middle of the road. So 3.5 actually means that I really liked it quite a bit. There are some very genuinely disturbing moments in this film. Out of everything that really gets me, it's like the body horror stuff. Like that stuff I find very, very disturbing, and there's quite a bit of body horror in here. Miles loves that shit, so I know he was going crazy in the seat next to me. But for me, I thought it was really gross and disturbing, and it genuinely like makes me uncomfortable. Like when I'm watching stuff like that, like that's the stuff that like really, really gets to me. And yeah, the film was great. The special effects are good. The directing's good. Nicolas Cage is over the top as ever. He's hilarious in the film in the best way possible. I love Nick Cage and pretty much everything. It sort of goes hand in hand with Mandy, which I haven't seen yet, but I heard he's pretty over the top and ridiculous in that one as well. I think there's a scene in this where Nick Cage is going through all of the produce that has been ruined on the farm, and he's just like punching the fucking fruit and everything, throwing it in the trash. Oh my god, it's great. But yeah, Color Out of Space, it's phenomenal. Definitely go check it out. It's not for the faint of heart. It's certainly not for everyone, but I liked it quite a bit. Performances across the board are great, direction's great, and I just really love the film's aesthetic. I love the purple color. It's just generally a very pleasing film to look at. It's very trippy. It's not pleasing to look at when the body horror stuff and the creepy shit's going on. But other than that, I mean, I couldn't take my eyes off of it. It was really, really great. So yeah, 3.5 stars. Definitely go check it out. What We Do in the Shadows was the next film that I saw this year. This was actually a rewatch for me. I just really felt like rewatching it again. It's a mockumentary film about vampires living in a flat together. It's directed by Taika Waititi, who directed Jojo Rabbit, and he's doing some of the Marvel movies now. And yeah, I'm a really big fan of his. I think he is one of the best directors in Hollywood right now. And What We Do in Shadows, it's a mockumentary, vampires and all of the misadventures they get into being roommates. They actually bite someone and welcome him into the family, basically. So it's also him trying to adjust to being a vampire. It's a little bit of a fish out of water story, but it's all done in mockumentary format. So it's in the vein of like Spinal Tap or something like that. It's really great. All the vampires in it do a great job. Taika Waititi actually plays one of the vampires in the film. It has the guy from Flight of the Conchords in it. He also helped write and do behind the scenes and stuff like that. They turned it into a miniseries on FX. Now, I haven't seen the series. It follows a different set of vampires and everything, but I hear the series is actually very, very good as well. But I haven't had the chance to watch it yet. But yeah, What We Do in Shadows, it's my favorite film by Taika Waititi. It's a really good vampire flick. I also gave it 3.5 stars. Again, it was a rewatch for me. I saw it before, so it wasn't anything that was too new to me. I mean, I knew that I liked it, and there's really not too much to say about it here. So yeah, I would just say go check it out. So the next film was another rental from us. We actually rented this one from the library. And I'm so sad that the library has been closed for a long time because our library here actually has a pretty good extensive collection of DVDs and VHS and stuff. So we actually rented a couple VHS from the library, and the only horror one that we rented was called Witch House. And Witch House, I gave it 2 stars, but it's definitely something that I would rewatch again. It's 2 stars because I really can't justify it giving it anything more than that, because technically speaking, it is a very flawed, bad film. But I actually really loved it a lot. It was a great time. It's the perfect thing to watch with a group of people who's just in the mood for something ridiculous. The basic plot, from what I remember, a bunch of teenagers, or maybe they're in their like early 20s, they go to stay the night in this witch house. It's this big creepy thing. I remember, I think they're doing like trying to conjure spirits in there or something, and it just goes completely off the rails. I remember the ending being really insane. There's not too much to say about it without spoiling everything, and honestly, I don't remember too much about it. I just remember it being a lot of fun. Of course, the acting at times can be atrocious. There's parts in the film where I remember you could see the boom mic and stuff like that. So, I mean, in general, it's just something that, I mean, from a technical, like, filmmaking standpoint, it's not the best, but it has a lot of heart behind it, and you can tell everyone was having a great time making it, and they did the best that they could, man. It's really, really fun. I would watch it again. I watched that one with Emily and a couple other people as well. And yeah, it was a great time. And I'm realizing that there were some films that I saw this year that I didn't rate on Letterboxd, because I remember the same night we watched Witch House, we watched In the Tall Grass or whatever on Netflix. For some reason, I forgot to rate that on Letterboxd. So I'll just talk about that a little bit. I like that one. It was pretty decent. I thought it went a little too long. It's not the greatest film in the world. I remember the basic plot is basically they are driving down this dirt road or whatever, and they hear someone screaming in the grass that they need help. And then once our 2 leads go into the grass, they can't find their way out. And I think it's based off of Stephen King. And the whole time they're just trying to get out of the grass, and there's a whole mystery involved. There's like a big rock in the grass that's like very creepy. I don't want to give everything away about the film, since it is relatively new. I think that film actually came out in 2020. or maybe late 2019, so that was another like new release. But yeah, I thought it was fun. I'm gonna have to rewatch it again to give it an accurate star rating because I don't remember what I would have rated it. But I remember it being a good time. Watched that with Emily, and I think my mother-in-law was over at the time to watch that. So yeah, that's In the Tall Grass. The next film that I watched this year was In Search of Darkness. I don't know if I made a video about this in the House of Horror Marathon. It's still up in the air. I'm recording this in early October, so I haven't finished every video that I'm working on for the end of the month. So you may see a video from about In Search of Darkness during the marathon. You may not. The only reason I'm hesitant on whether to do it or not is because they just announced a sequel to it not too long ago. So part of me wants to hold off and wait for the sequel and review them both at the same time, and part of me wants to just review the first part and then talk about the sequel, because the film was marketed as the definitive horror documentary. And if it was so definitive, why are you making a sequel? What more could there possibly be to cover if this was in fact the definitive horror documentary? But that's besides the point. So In Search of Darkness, I first found out about this film last year around this time because James Rolfe on his new season of Cinemassacre's Monster Madness was talking about it, and he's actually in the film. And it's basically a horror documentary. It's 4 hours long. It covers all of these films during the 80s, a lot of significant ones. I think it's like 70 films or something like that, maybe more, maybe like 75 films. I don't have my notes with me, but I actually did keep track of all the films it was talking about. And just my general thoughts, because I might still be doing a video about this year, and if not, I'm definitely doing one next year when part 2 is released. So I'm going to be talking about this film on the channel a lot. So I don't want to go too in-depth on it here. I love the artwork of the film, and I love the music. The music is that classic 80s synth, and the artwork is like instantly iconic. It's like a kid sitting in front of the TV, and you just really relate to it. I mean, if you grew up watching horror films in the 80s or 90s or early 2000s like me, like we all were that kid watching these movies like an inch away from our television. But yeah, we can still see fine. I guess it was a myth if sitting that close to the TV makes you blind or anything. But I mean, I'm still pretty young, so I might get blind later. But yeah, it's a 4-hour documentary. You're in it for the long haul. My name is actually in the credits because I donated to the cause to get it out. There was a little controversy with the release of it because some of the Blu-rays were delivered damaged or not delivered at all. And I know me personally, I got like the bundle that comes with a poster and a pin and some other like memorabilia, but it didn't come with the pin. Like I didn't receive the pin, so either it got lost or they forgot to put it in there or whatever, but that's besides the point. If anyone is listening to this from the In Search of Darkness production, I want my pin. Send me my pin. Fuck. I'm just kidding. I don't really care too much. But yeah, I thought it was a really entertaining film for what it was. A lot of people have critiqued it because since they are cramming so much into it, like 75 plus films in there, they don't really spend too much time on it. On each film in particular. And actually my favorite parts about the film are the bumpers in between the years. Like they always do like a little segment like women in horror film. They do a segment about some other things that aren't specifically on one film in particular, but just cover like a general horror related topic about something that was going on during that time. So I really enjoyed those more than the segments where they're talking about the films, quite honestly. John Carpenter's in it. Tom Holland, the director, not Tom Holland, Spider-Man, but Tom Holland, the director, is in it. They have some couple other people in that. I think Elvira's in it. James Rolfe, as I mentioned, is in it from Cinemassacre. The guy from the Dead Meat Show is in it. And I'm just going to be flat out. I think that his portions of it were probably the worst out of the whole documentary. His stuff just sounded like way too scripted to me, and I didn't really dig it. I don't know if they just needed to use him to sort of like bridge the gaps in between stuff, but I don't know if that's just the way he talks. I don't necessarily watch his show. I'm sure he's a great guy, but I just didn't really like his segments in this film. Again, to me, like when you're having like people's talk really like off the cuff and honest, and you can tell it's an interview, it just clashes so much with him that sounds just like so heavily scripted, and that is sort of how he talks, because I've seen some clips from his show, but it just doesn't mesh in very well, and they also use him a lot. So they really like this guy, but for me, it didn't do much for me. Again, I'm sure he's a great guy and everything, but wasn't necessarily a fan of how he was used in the documentary. I still gave it 4 stars. It's still incredible. And yeah, I may or may not be talking about it more on the show this year, but definitely next year when part 2 comes out, I'm either talking about just part 2 if I don't do part 1 this year, or both of them if I don't do it this year. Next film I watched was Donnie Darko. Again, I've seen this film 100 times, but every time I see it, I kind of like it less and less, so I've kind of avoided it in the past few years. I was big on this film in high school. I mean, I was obsessed with this film in high school. I don't really need to talk about the plot, because, I mean, everyone who knows about Donnie Darko has seen it. And there's nothing really I could say about the plot. I mean, it's about Jake Gyllenhaal, he plays Donnie Darko. There's some trippy shit in there. There's Frank the Rabbit in it, who's telling him to do this stuff. There's some vandalism at the school, and the people think that it's him. And he's just really, like, challenging authority a lot in the film. It's a good coming-of-age story. Like, I feel like a lot of teenagers can relate to him. He also has a lot of mental illness going on. He has to take medication. He has like some hallucinations and stuff, and we don't know if the Frank the Rabbit is real or not. I guess until you get to the end and you see some stuff, and then even then you're questioning what's real and what isn't. There's time travel aspects involved in it. Some really like physiological stuff in there. And yeah, I mean, I still love the film a lot. I mean, I still regard it as one of my favorite films of all time, just because it has such a huge influence on me on my life. But yeah, I try to avoid watching it, because it's just one of those films, every time I watch it, I don't like it as much. But it's still a 4-star film for me. I don't like it as much as I did when I was in high school, around the same age as Jake Gyllenhaal's character in the film. But I still like it a lot, man. I mean, it's iconic. It's absolutely one of the biggest cult films of all time. Stay away from the sequel. Do not watch S. Darko. It's really, really bad. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much all I have to say about it. The next film I watched this year was Carnival of Souls. I had to rewatch Carnival of Souls because I did a 15 Phenomenal Facts video about it. As you guys know, if you haven't checked out the video yet, go check it out. So yeah, I talked about it enough in that video. I gave it 4 stars, and yeah, just check the video out, man. There's not too much to say about it here. Same with the next film, which is White Zombie. Same situation as the first, had to rewatch it because I am doing a video about it. Either if this comes out in November, you already know that, but if you haven't, but if this does come out during October, there is a video about White Zombie that's coming out a little later on in the month. But if this is in November or whatever, you already know that, so go watch it if it's out already. And if it's not out yet, make sure you stay tuned. Gave it that one 3 stars. It's a Bela Lugosi film, independent film, right off the coattails of Dracula fame. Bela Lugosi is at it again. And yeah, so I'm saving it for the video. So if you guys want to check that out, go ahead and do that. So the next film on my list is actually around when the shutdown started, I believe. We definitely heard about like coronavirus and stuff before that. But this is around the time, from what I can recall, like the actual businesses were shutting down and stuff like that. So this may have been my first quarantine film. And I really just wanted to work through a few of my VHS that I either hadn't watched in a while or hadn't seen at all before. A lot of like old school stuff. So I had like a marathon of a few days where I just wanted to watch a bunch of Lugosi films. I mean, and Karloff films. Karloff films mostly, but Lugosi is in a couple of them. The first one was actually that I watched was The Man They Could Not Hang. And that's a film I've had on VHS for a while. And I think I may have seen it before, but it was before I had Letterboxd. So I didn't rate it or anything. I had at least seen parts of it before, but I don't know if I'd watched the entire film front to back. The basic premise of The Man Who Could Not Hang, again, it stars Boris Karloff. And he is a scientist who is working on bringing the dead back to life, like the recently deceased. Not in like a Frankenstein monster type of scenario, but in a trying to cheat death scenario, I guess. So, like, he does all these experiments, and he actually kills his assistant, willingly, by the way. Like, his assistant wants to do this in order to be brought back to life. But unfortunately, the police come before he is able to finish the experiment. So we don't know if Karloff's experiment would have worked or not. I mean, we can assume that it would. But either way, he's brought to court, and he's sentenced to death for his crimes. And then, unbeknownst to everyone else, he actually tells them he wants his body to be donated to science, and then it ends up he's back at his own facility, and he is brought back to life. So the rest of the film is him basically getting revenge on the people who sent him to death. And I see this film as like a precursor to Jigsaw, the villain. I don't know why I said Jaws. They will start with J. I got a little screwed up. I'm sorry, internet. I am sorry. I accidentally started saying Jaws when I meant to say Jigsaw or Saw. Saw and Jaw. I mean, there's just a lot of factors going on here, guys. A lot of factors getting me to screw up my words on the podcast. Haven't you noticed, like, if you guys listen to podcasts, everyone goes like, oh yeah, on the pod. I've never fucking said, oh yeah, let's say this on the pod, or yeah, go listen to my pod. I've never done that until now. I just really hate that. It's just a pet peeve of mine. A pet motherfucking peeve. Sorry for my language, kids. I'm sorry about all that. This is a family show. Not really. Anyway, man, they could not hang. So yeah, he's acting like Jigsaw from the Saw films, where he's basically doing all this stuff to bad people, in his view. Technically, he is a bad guy. I mean, you do see some pentagrams throughout the film, like in his office. So maybe he's not really an upstanding citizen, for all we know. I mean, back then, Satanists were portrayed as bad people. Maybe that's not necessarily the case now. I certainly don't think so, especially if you actually read about what Satanism is actually about. But as far as how they're portrayed, they're not portrayed well in films. Gave this film 3.5 stars. So it was excellent for the time. It's excellent now. I would rewatch it again. Definitely. Loved it a lot. The next films I watched were The Black Cat and the Raven, both starring Lugosi and Karloff. Again, actually, I recently acquired these on VHS. It's actually a double feature VHS. They're both on the same one. And I had seen both of these films before, but I was excited to rewatch them. Again, I just love watching stuff on VHS. I think it's such a good experience. I mean, I feel like kids in this generation and generations beyond that, they're not going to know about VHS, and like having to rewind, and then like just the way that you rewind and fast forward it, and how you get like the little lines at the top and it's like all jittery. Oh, I just love VHS, everything about it. But yeah, I mean, I'm just rambling at this point. So The Black Cat and the Raven, they're loosely based off of the Edgar Allan Poe stories, obviously. The Black Cat is basically about Lugosi and a couple other people ending up at Karloff's house. I forget what his name is. I think his name is Pearlzig. His character in the film is named Pearlzig. And basically he is a devil worshiper, yet again. And it's basically a battle between Lugosi's character and Karloff's character in the film. I actually am going to look this up because their names are driving me crazy. Because I know Lugosi is Dr. Vitus Vertigast in The Raven, but I forget what his character name is in The Black Cat. So I actually am going to look that up quickly here. Oh, no, Dr. Vitus Vertigast in The Black Cat. So what is his name in The Raven? Yes, Pearlzig is Karloff, so The Raven with Lugosi. What's his name in The Raven? Jesus, this is making for great content, boys and girls. Dr. Valen. Okay, yeah, Dr. Valen. So yeah, Vertigast is in The Black Cat, and it's basically a battle between Vertigast and Pearlzig. And you're definitely on the side of Lugosi's character in this one. But in The Raven, the roles are kind of reversed, where Lugosi is the one that is much more sinister, and Karloff is the one you're kind of rooting for. So yeah, the roles are reversed. They're great companion pieces. They're perfect to have on a VHS together because obviously they go together so well. Both based off of Edgar Allan Poe. Both have the same leading actors in them. There's also Murders in the Ruge Morgue, which isn't talked about as much as the other ones. That one I haven't seen, but that one also stars Lugosi in it. So that's definitely one I'm going to need to check out. But I love The Black Cat. I love The Raven. The Raven, I talked about this one in my top 10 Universal films. So I actually like The Raven a little bit more than The Black Cat because The Black Cat didn't make the list. It probably would have been on the list if it was like a top 15 or even a top 11. If it was a top 11, probably The Black Cat would have been on there. I don't know if The Man Who Could Not Hang was Universal or not. I don't know. But either way, The Man They Could Not Hang in the film I'm talking about next were a little bit later on, so they didn't count during like that original cycle that I did the Universal films for. And again, none of this really matters. So yeah, The Raven, Lugosi's character, he is a world-renowned surgeon, and after he saves the life of this girl, he falls in love with her, and he feels like since he saved her life, he should have her. Karloff is in there as sort of like a henchman, and Lugosi actually does plastic surgery on his face and screws up his face basically in order to get him to help him. Yeah, and it's just a good battle between Karloff and Lugosi. I gave both the films 3 stars. Yeah, they're both really, really great. The Body Snatcher is another one that has both of them in it, but Lugosi is sort of like a bit part. The Body Snatcher was the next film I watched, obviously. And this was the last one out of that Karloff VHS trend that I was on for about a week or so when I was watching all of these. So The Body Snatcher is a film that is based off of a Robert Louis Stevenson novel, I believe. And the basic premise of the film is that there is this doctor that needs dead bodies and stuff to do practice and stuff on. So Karloff is kind of like his hitman, basically. He is the Body Snatcher. He's killing these people for him, and he's basically like this dirty character because the doctor's all high class and stuff, and then he just contrasts so well with Karloff's character, who's just so evil and ruthless and hilarious. He keeps calling the doctor Toddy McFarlane, just to like get under his skin and stuff. So Karloff is absolutely great in this film. It's one of his best performances. I don't like it as much as the other films I talked about, just as a whole. But it's still really great. It's still 3 stars, but I still like The Raven, The Black Cat, and The Man Who Could Not Hang a little more than The Body Snatcher. It's still really great. I feel like they could have done something more with Lugosi. As I said, he kind of has like a little cameo, like bit part in it, where he just plays like this pathetic like janitor, and he's killed like almost immediately by Karloff. Like he has a couple scenes, and then Karloff just gives him the business, and then that's it. So they definitely could have done more with Lugosi, as with a lot of production companies and films could have done a lot more with Lugosi. He was such like a great talent who was typecast and people didn't really know his range or all that he could do, but was a fantastic actor. Definitely not a one-note performance with Dracula. He definitely could do a lot of stuff. But yeah, The Body Snatcher, not too much to say about it. It's a period piece. It's great. Yeah, if you are into old school films, definitely check out all of these ones. The Body Snatcher, The Raven, The Black Cat, and The Man They Could Not Hang. All very, very great. The next film I watched was Alien, a film that I've seen 100 times, but Emily had never seen it, so we were watching it with her for the first time. She really liked the film. The film is a slasher film that is just in outer space. It definitely can be described as a sci-fi film, but I consider it more of a horror film. Of course, if you know anything about me, you know that I'm a big Disney fan, and the Great Movie Ride was one of my favorite attractions at Disney World. And Alien makes an appearance in that one. It was one of my favorite parts of the attraction. Terrified me as a kid. But Alien's great. There's really nothing that I can say about Alien that hasn't been said to death like a billion times. So yeah, it's definitely one that everyone needs to check out. Of course, Sigourney Weaver as Ripley is fantastic in the film. The special effects are great. Ridley Scott's direction is great. Ridley Scott and Ripley, the character, that sort of duality there. And of course, It was very influential. It was a very influential film on like the series Metroid, who also has a character named Ridley in it. And it also takes place in space in like a claustrophobic environment, with a strong female lead. So yeah, very, very influential. I haven't seen many of the sequels. Like I've seen Alien 2 and I've seen Alien 3, obviously, but I haven't seen like Prometheus and Alien Covenant or Resurrection or anything like that. But I like the first two films. Alien 2 is definitely more of an action film than it is a horror film. And then Alien 3, I do not like. It was David Fincher's first feature film and they didn't really let him do what he wanted to do, so it kind of turned out to be a train wreck. But that's besides the point. I've been wanting to do my top 10 David Fincher films for so long, but I haven't gotten around to doing it. And this year has to be the year, 2020 or early 2021, because he has a new film coming out. So I need to do my top 10 while he only has 10 films out. Or I could do a top 11 and be like the nostalgia critic or whatever. But I kind of want to do it with the films that are out now, the top 10 Fincher films. I am way off track, but I do not care. I watched the miniseries Cursed Films on Shudder around this time. I also skipped that I watched the 2020 version of Dracula in this, but I've already talked about that by now on the channel. I'm sure I've talked about the 2020 Dracula, so I completely forgot to talk about that one and skipped right over it when I was scrolling past it on my thing because I didn't even think about talking about it. But Cursed Films, it's another one I wanted to do a video about, but I don't think that it's really feasible for me to do a video about it. Basically, the film is like, well, it's not a film, it's a mini-series on Shudder. It was a Shudder original, and it's sort of like a bait and switch, basically. And by that, I mean it's selling you on the fact that these are cursed films, when in fact they're not really talking about the curses involved with the film. It's more like behind the scenes and like sort of the after effects of the curse. It goes over films like The Exorcist, Poltergeist, The Omen, The Crow, and Twilight Zone the movie. Again, I still might do a video about this in some capacity, so I'm not really going to talk about it too much here. But it just talks about what happened on the sets of these films. A lot of these films had really like fucked up productions. Like obviously The Crow with the horrible incident of Brandon Lee getting shot. Twilight Zone the movie, which has perhaps the worst tragedy to ever happen on a film set, or one of the worst ever. And it really portrays Landis as a monster in this. So this is not doing good for Landis's character. And honestly, it's going to make it hard for me to watch his films in the future, if I even decide to revisit some of his films. Because yeah, it's pretty fucked up. I'm not going to lie. It talks about The Exorcist, all the bad stuff that happened with The Exorcist and Poltergeist and The Omen. Again, I'm not going to go too in depth with any of this stuff. And yeah, and part of the reason I was sort of like disappointed with cursed films is because it is like that bait and switch kind of scenario. Like I wanted more about the curses in these films. And like, for example, The Exorcist episode, it talks about The Exorcist curse at the beginning, and then it goes into a real life exorcism, and it's talking about how it could be mental illness and like all that kind of stuff, and it's showing a guy who needs to be exorcised or whatever, and that's the whole like second half of the episode, so it kind of like loses its steam. So I will say this, like the first half of every episode of this show gives you what you want, and then the second half it's a little off the rails at times, but I still really enjoyed the series, even though it wasn't what I expected it to be. I gave it 4 stars on Letterboxd, and yeah, I thought it was great. The next films that I watched, these were both rewatches for me, The Night Stalker and The Night Strangler. I both gave them 4 stars. I love both of these films. I've probably talked about these before on the channel, but if not, I am going to keep this short and sweet because I am planning to talk about these if I haven't talked about them already. Not this year, but next year. So yeah, I'm going to keep it short and sweet about The Night Stalker and The Night Strangler. And I've also been watching Kolchak the Night Stalker, the series that was based off of these films. If you haven't heard about them before, it's because they're kind of underrated. They were TV films in the 70s and a TV show in the 70s. It stars Darren McGavin as Kolchak, the Night Stalker, who is a journalist. It's his perfect role. It was the perfect role for Darren McGavin. You know him as the dad in A Christmas Story. But yeah, so just in case you watch The Night Stalker randomly and you're like, who is that actor? Who is that guy? It's the dad from Christmas Story. It's a big different kind of role, but yeah. Again, I don't want to say too much about it because if I haven't talked about them already, I'm going to talk about them on the channel pretty extensively at some point. Maybe not this year, maybe next year, but at some point I am going to be talking about all of these in depth. So yeah, I don't want to go into it too much more than that. They both got 4 stars from me, and the series is great as well. So the next film that I watched this film with Emily, The Little Vampire. And this was watching, I don't know why we decided to watch it. I think we were just scrolling through free movies that we could get on Vudu. And The Little Vampire was on there, and we were like, fuck it, we're going to watch The Little Vampire. And this was actually what triggered me to do the video of my top 10 films that sparked my horror interest. Because we rewatched this film, and it got me thinking about all the films that I watched when I was a kid. And The Little Vampire was one of those kids. One of those films that I watched as a kid. As you can tell, I stutter over my words all of the time, and I do apologize for that. Again, I'm trying to get better with this. How am I doing so far? How am I doing so far with this solo show? If you're watching this on YouTube, take a second and let me know down in the comment section below how this episode has been going. If you're watching it on a podcast streaming service, just tweet at me. I mean, all my handles are in the description there in the show notes, so that's that. So The Little Vampire, it's a film about a kid who moves to a different country, doesn't fit in with anyone there, and then he makes friends with a vampire who really doesn't fit in with anyone there. Again, I talked about all of this in my video, so I'm not going to go on and on about it. Gave it 3.5 stars. It's a great kids film. And it holds up rather well. A lot of the images of this film are burned into my brain. Like, I remember the opening sequence where they're all looking at the sky, and it's like a nightmare scene, and of course that comes back at the end of the film. Just a very, very memorable film for me. I loved it as a kid. I love it now. It's very dated. It's very goofy and silly. It's obviously a kid's film, but there's a lot to enjoy there. And there's nothing wrong with kids' films. 3.5 stars for me. So the next couple films on this list are actually going to be films that I saw at the drive-in. So for those of you who remember from last year, I had Jeremy Herbert on the show. He was selling me on the idea of the drive-in. And if you haven't listened to that episode, go ahead and listen to it because we talk all about the drive-in. And so I went this year for the first time, and I absolutely loved it. I went 2 weekends in a row. So these next 3 films are going to be horror films that I saw there. They were all double features, but one of them wasn't a horror film. It was actually Knives Out. So I'm not going to be talking about that one in this particular podcast. But I went 2 weekends in a row, opening weekend and then the weekend after that. I haven't gone since because they haven't really been showing anything of interest to me, and the timing just hasn't really worked out. There's a couple times where I wanted to go, like they were doing like an Austin Powers triple feature one night. But the timing just didn't work out because I don't want to go to the drive-in by myself. Like, I want to go with my wife or with Miles or Jared or whatever. And it's just so hard to get everyone together and go watch a film, especially 2 films at a time. It's a big time commitment. But yeah, so we went those first 2 weekends. I'm hoping to get back now that it's October. I'm sure that they're doing a lot of stuff. So maybe by the time you're listening to this, I would have been back to the drive-in by now. But wow, I am stumbling. As of this recording, I've only gone these 2 times. And just a little background about this drive-in, it's actually sandwiched in between the freeway and train tracks. So early on, when people are still coming home from their job or whatever, the first film kind of gets drowned out by the noise a little bit. But then by the time the second film rolls around, it's completely dark outside, it's quiet. And it's just all around better to watch the second film. But regardless, I had a lot of fun at the drive-in both of these times. For the first night we went, we saw a double feature. The first film of the double feature was The Invisible Man, which was a film I wanted to see in theaters back before the shutdown, but didn't get the chance to do so. Obviously a huge fan of the Universal Invisible Man film. I like the Universal version better. I mean, they're both Universal, but I'm talking about the black and white one. I like that one significantly better than this one. I still like The Invisible Man a lot, like the new one. It twists the story a little bit. It's about an abusive, I can't remember if it's her husband. Yeah, it has to be her husband. It's an abusive husband or boyfriend or whatever. And he goes missing. He's assumed to be dead. And our lead sees him, well, doesn't see him because he's invisible, but just knows that he's around stalking her. And it's a good horror movie, man. It definitely changes a lot of things from the original. As in, it's not like a scientist who had a potion that turned him invisible. In this, spoiler alert for this film if you haven't seen it. I know it's a new release, but he's actually using like some sort of invisibility suit that he developed. And there's a lot of twists and turns if it's actually the guy or if it's the guy's brother or what's really going on here. And there's a lot of twists and turns in the story. It's very good. The ending is great. I really like the film. I gave it 3 stars. I probably would have given it more stars if I watched it at home, not at the drive-in with a bunch of trains going on the whole time. Because, yeah, the first film, as I mentioned, it's kind of hard to completely focus on it. But, yeah, I really like The Invisible Man. Not as good as the original, but still like it a lot. The second film that we watched that night, the second part of the double feature, was The Hunt. And now this film was given a lot of controversy around when it was about to be released. I'm sure everyone remembers the trailers. It's basically a remake of The Most Dangerous Game, where people like the elite are hunting like the lower class people on this island. It's basically a remake of that. And there's obviously a lot of violence and guns and shooting. And of course, the weekend it was supposed to come out, it was like coinciding with a bunch of school shootings and stuff like that. So the film was delayed indefinitely. Like, we didn't know what was going to happen with the film. So then once the shutdown happened, I guess the studio was basically like, fuck it, we're finally going to release The Hunt. So that's what we did. We saw it as the second night of a triple feature, as I mentioned. A double feature, not triple feature. I'm sorry for the flub. I gave it 2.5 stars. I didn't like it that much. Like, I mean, I thought it was okay. There's definitely some parts where it goes off the rails. And yeah, I mean, there's not too much to say about it. I don't want to say I had high expectations for it or anything. I kind of thought, because I wasn't going to see it really originally anyway, but since it was the part of the double feature, I mean, it was whatever. It was sort of in the same vein of Ready or Not. Like, the trailers didn't really sell me on it, and I wasn't that interested in it, but since I watched it, I mean, I thought it was good. There were a few surprises in it. Of course, it's a good time. I mean, there's a lot of, like, funny stuff in there that happens. There's some laugh-out-loud moments, and there's some genuinely gruesome moments and some interesting stuff going on there. It's a really fun film, but for me, it doesn't really stick out that much to me. And yeah, I was also really tired towards the tail end there, because of course you don't get out of the drive-in until like 2 a.m. pretty much, because there's about, I don't know, I want to say like a half-hour gap in between the films. Sometimes it feels a little longer, but just enough time to get to the concession stand and get some snacks or go to the bathroom or whatever. So yeah, the second films usually don't start till like 11:30 or even midnight in some cases. The second weekend we went to the drive-in, we saw the double feature of The Wretched and Knives Out. The Wretched was the first film we saw, Knives Out was the second one. I had already seen Knives Out, so during the second part I was kind of falling asleep. Not because I don't like the film, I do like the film quite a bit, but it is a long film. It's not the perfect choice to put as the second film of a double feature at the drive-in and start it at like midnight, because then you're getting out at like 2:33 in the morning basically by the time you get out of there. But yeah, and that was also a very cold night, so that drive-in experience wasn't really the best. It was kind of cold. I think this was in like April. Yeah, it was really cold. It might have been May, early May, April. But yeah, so The Wretched was a film that was one of the highest grossing drive-in releases ever. It sort of spread by word of mouth. I don't remember too much about the plot. Basically there's a family being haunted by a witch or a demon, whatever, that like lives next door. It's a really fun film. There's just nothing really notable about it to really talk about. I did enjoy it quite a bit. Miles liked it a lot. And again, since you're at the drive-in, you're not really getting the full experience of it because there's just so much other noise and stuff going on. And I love that about the drive-in. Like, it adds to the charm, like, so much. But if you're actually, like, trying to sit there and really take in the film, it's not really going to do it for you. So yeah. Not too much to say about The Wretched. That's definitely one I want to watch again at home just so I can really get into it. Because just at the drive-in, I mean, even when it's the first film, like, it's still a little light outside and people are hanging out, like, talking and stuff. So, like, we weren't really paying, like, super hard attention to the film. Like, mainly you're going to the drive-in to hang out. You're not really going to watch the films. I mean, you are, but the film isn't the only thing about the drive-in. It's a whole atmosphere and experience. So The Wretched is definitely one I'm going to want to rewatch. After that, I rewatched Jason X with Miles. He had just come over one night, and we were bored trying to find something to watch. He picked out a few options, and we just wanted something fun and goofy to watch, so we rewatched Jason X for some reason. It's Jason in space. I mean, who doesn't love the concept of Jason Voorhees in space? It's not one of the strongest Friday the 13th films, depending on the way you look at it, or it could be one of the best, because it's just so off the rails and ridiculous. It's out of this world. It is out of this world. There's the classic scene where he dunks the girl's face in, like, the water, and she freezes, and then he smashes her head on the counter, and her fucking frozen brain goes everywhere. There's the scene with the sleeping bags where he picks up a person in a sleeping bag and smacks the other person with it until they all die. It's fucking great. I gave it 2.5 stars just because I can't justify giving it anything more than that. But it's still a ton of fun. The next film we watched was The Lost Boys. I watched that with Emily, showing that to her for the first time. Very iconic 80s vampire film. If you haven't seen it before, it's definitely one of the essential vampire films from the 80s that you need to watch. That along with Fright Night. I personally prefer Fright Night a little more than I prefer The Lost Boys, but I like both of them a lot. Of course, the story involves our titular lead, who sort of goes down a little bit of a dark path. He's hanging out with these biker boys, and it turns out that they are a gang of vampires. No one in the town... Well, actually, a lot of people in the town believe that the vampires are around, but they don't mess with them or anything. And yeah, there's not too much to say about it that hasn't already been said. If you haven't seen The Lost Boys, go see Lost Boys. I gave it 3.5 stars on this rewatch of it. It's about the same as I remember. I remember always liking it. I never thought it was the greatest film of all time. Like, I still love the film a lot, but there's definitely more vampire films out there that I like a lot more, like Fright Night, as I mentioned, both around the same time period. And yeah, I don't know what else to say about Lost Boys. We mainly put it on because my wife had never seen it, and we were going through this... she's going through this vampire phase where she's watching Twilight and all this kind of stuff, so I wanted to give her some vampires to look at. I'm a good husband like that. I put that on for my wife to look at the vampires, okay? But anyway, I guess we'll say the next film my wife put on for me. So the next film I watched with my wife was The Love Witch. And this was one of the films that she's been trying to get me to watch for months and months and months. And we just never got around to watching it. And we finally watched it one night. And I was really, really impressed with The Love Witch. It's an unexpected gem. If I would have seen it at the time I recorded my top 10 modern horror classics video, this would probably be on there. But unfortunately, I hadn't seen it at the time. I wasn't aware of it. I think this one came out in like 2016 or something like that. But it's essentially shot like an old Technicolor film from the late 50s or 60s. And it looks great. It looks like a Hammer horror film. I think it was the last film to actually be shot in Technicolor. Don't quote me on that, but I believe it was one of the last films, if not the last film to be shot in Technicolor at the time of this recording. I gave it 3.5 stars. Yeah, I don't want to give too much away about the plot on this one because I want everyone to go watch it. I mean, it's still a relatively new film. It's an underrated film. It's about a witch, and she's casting spells and stuff. She's trying to find the perfect man. There's some adultery involved in it. There's some spells. There's some crazy stuff going on. I just love the atmosphere and the vibe of this film. Like, it's truly a love letter to a dying age of cinema, just like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was. This is a love letter to all of the Hammer horror films back then. And yeah, I mean, the Love Witch is just an iconic character in the film. And there is one scene that I do not like about this film, and I have to bring it up. I don't like the fact that I have to bring it up, but if you were to put this film on for anyone and give them no context, they might not know that this is a modern film, except for one scene. Like, everything blends in seamlessly with a film from the 60s or 70s. The architecture, the dialogue, the music, just the way that the story is told, everything about it is just an essence of old cinema. And then there's a scene with someone on a cell phone. A cell phone rings, she pulls it out, and she talks on a cell phone. And it's just so out of place, because the whole rest of the film, we don't see any technology at all, to my recollection. And just in this one scene, they randomly pull out a cell phone. And I was shocked. I was dumbfounded. I couldn't believe that they did that. And then I'm sure if I rewatch the film and I pay more closer attention, there might be other references that this is actually in modern day. But up until that point, man, you could have really convinced someone that this was done in the 60s or 70s. So I wish that they didn't do that. That is one decision in this film, to have that cell phone scene, that I do not agree with. I don't know why they did it. It doesn't really add anything to the plot. Like, you could have done it so many different ways. And again, I'm sure if I rewatch the film, now that I do know that it is taking place in modern day, I'm sure some of the cars are modern. I'm sure there's some other stuff that makes it a giveaway. But up until that point, I mean, I knew the film was made in 2016, but up until that point, it could have completely passed as something that was made way earlier than that. So yeah, with all of that, it may sound like I don't like the film, but I loved the film a lot. 3.5 stars. It would have been 4 stars if it wasn't for that scene. It's definitely one I'm going to be revisiting for sure in the future. Yeah, and I can't wait to watch it again, honestly. Like, I thought it was really good. Me and my wife have really been into, like, the witchy stuff recently. We went to the Buckland Witchcraft Museum, which, again, depending on the timeline of this, I may or may not have already talked about on the show. And we've just been doing, like, witchy stuff at home, man. I mean, like, we've been casting, like, peace spells, and we've been burning sage and incense, and we're on that cottagecore witchy vibe in this house. Just really getting in tune with the world and atmosphere and all that kind of stuff. So we've really been into the witchy stuff, and that's why we wanted to watch this film. She had seen it a couple times before that, but I was seeing it for the first time. The next film I rewatched the original Dracula film, not Nosferatu, but the original Dracula film with Bela Lugosi, and that's mainly because I signed up for Peacock, and it was free on the app, and I was like, oh, what the hell, I'll just put it on tonight or whatever, just have it on in the background, so I wasn't really paying too much attention to it. It's an absolute classic. It's not the greatest film of all time, but I love it a lot. I gave it 4 stars, obviously. The first third of the film is phenomenal when Jonathan Harker is at the castle, but then after that it kind of goes downhill once we're actually in England and stuff. It's almost like Todd Browning forgot he was making a movie, as me and Mark Drwiziak have talked about on the show before. There's like a scene where there's a wolf out on the lawn, and like they don't show the wolf, it's just shot like a stage play. I mean, it was based off the stage play, but it's like, you're not shooting a stage play, you're shooting a film. So like, I think they could have done a lot more with it. If you've seen the Spanish version of Dracula, it is better in terms of direction and camera work and stuff, but even that, it doesn't do everything that it could have done. But if you were to put Bela Lugosi in the Spanish version, or just have the Spanish version directed, have the director of the Spanish version direct the English version, is what I was attempting to say. The English version would be so much better. It still wouldn't be great, but it would have been a lot better than what we got. Excuse me, I burped. I'm not editing it out. Sorry. Just a little burp. You can deal with a little burp. It was just a little burp. I mean, you're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. Don't worry. It was just a little burp. Anyway, But anyway, I don't want to keep going on and on about Dracula, so that's all I'm going to say about it, man. I mean, someday I might even do like a full commentary of Dracula on the show. I have no idea. But, so the next film on my list is Terror in the Midnight Sun, alternatively titled Invasion of the Animal People, I believe. And I wanted to watch this film because I saw a couple screen caps from it of the monster, and I was like, that's a cool looking monster. I want to watch this film. But unfortunately, it's really slow, and the monsters are only in it for a couple minutes. There's not too much to say about it. If you want to watch it, just skip to the scenes with the monsters in it, or just watch a few clips from it, because the monster is cool. It's a cool design and everything. It's not something you really see too often of. And, yeah. So I like the monsters in it, but the film that the monster is in is absolutely terrible. I gave it 1 star. It was so boring. Of course, it was made way back in the day, so that was common of the time. The next film that I watched is Zombarella's House of Horrors. Similar to Buddy's House of Horror, I guess, only horrors, like W-H, like horrors. I watched this one right before I actually interviewed Tony Masiello on the podcast, just because I wanted to watch it just to sort of get a little sense of what it was about. And it's a horror anthology. They're all shot on video. And yeah, if you want to support sovhorror.com, just go order a few of the films, order Zombarella. He actually is releasing a sequel. It's called like Naughty Natasha or something like that. He just announced it at the time of this recording. So definitely go check that out. Check out everything and check out my review. I mean, not my review, my interview with Tony. It's a fun time. So I didn't rate it on Letterboxd, but I remember watching it around that time. I think I watched it the same day as Invasion of the Animal People. So that's why I just remember that I watched it. The next films I watched, actually, were The Alvin and the Chipmunks Meet the Wolfman and Alvin and the Chipmunks Meet Frankenstein. And this was actually right after I shot the video of my top 10 horror sparking interest films, because I mentioned in that video, I should definitely rewatch these. I remember them being a good time, at least the Wolfman one. And I rewatched them, and the Wolfman one holds up phenomenally. Alvin and the Chipmunks Meet the Wolfman is a great first horror spooky film to show your kids. I have a lot of nostalgia for Alvin and the Chipmunks in this film specifically. So maybe I'm nostalgia blind a little bit, but this film is really great. It actually works like a horror film. There's some spooky elements in it. It builds up atmosphere well. Of course, there's a lot of humor and songs. The songs in it are great. There's the Monster Out in You song. There's Everything's Gonna Be All Right, as the name of the song. Sorry, I flubbed a little there. Monks on a Mission. The soundtrack's just great. The story is great. The characters are lovable, obviously. And yeah, I gave it 4 stars. It's really, really great. If you have kids, check it out. I mean, if you're an adult and you like Alvin and the Chipmunks, or you're just curious, I say check it out. I mean, I thought it was really good, honestly. Alvin and the Chipmunks Meet Frankenstein, however, this one is not the best. It doesn't really play out like a horror film, really. Frankenstein's just kind of in it. Like, if you didn't... You could have put anything in there. I mean, like, it doesn't even give off any spooky vibes at all, really. It takes place at a theme park where they made a Frankenstein castle-like attraction, and Frankenstein's like on the loose, and like Alvin and the Chipmunks are running around like on the roller coaster and stuff after hours. They work at the theme park, and Alvin goes like crazy at the end. I can't remember, they like put a spell on him or something. I don't know, I can't remember. But this one is definitely the weaker of the 2 films, significantly weaker than of the 2 films. Yeah, I gave it 2 stars. I don't think I want to rewatch that one. The music is also not very good in it. But the Wolfman one is way, way better. I still love the Wolfman one. And maybe that's why I don't really remember the Frankenstein one that much, because it isn't that notable and it's not that good, honestly. Apparently before both of those, there was another Alvin and the Chipmunks, like Halloween special, but I haven't seen that. So maybe someday I'll have to check that one out. And then the next film that I watched, which is actually going to be the last one that I'm going to talk about in depth here, because I think I've been going for about an hour now. Maybe a little longer or a little less, I don't know. I didn't pay attention to when I started recording. But I've been going for a while, so this is actually going to be the last one I'm going to talk about, because the films after this are actually The Innkeepers and Undead, which I would have talked about on the channel already by now in my series with Miles. So I think this film, before those two, is a good stopping point for this episode, and maybe I'll do a follow-up after this of some of the other ones that I watched after this. But right now, this is a good stopping point, I guess, and I can always do a follow-up episode, maybe towards the end of the year, and just go through everything that I watched from The Craft until now. So The Craft is another film Emily's been trying to get me to watch for a very, very long time. We have it on VHS. I bought it for her on VHS at a horror flea market. And yeah, this is one I think everyone should watch if you haven't seen it. It was made in the 90s. It stars Neve Campbell as one of the witches in the coven, who you know from Scream. And you've seen images from this film. Even if you haven't seen the film, because I haven't. Before I had watched it, I hadn't seen it before, but I'd seen the images from it. Like, there's the coven on the beach casting a spell. There's the scenes like of them walking at school. Basically, like, the basic plot of the plot of the film is this girl doesn't really fit in with anyone. She's trying to make friends, and she just happens to make friends with a coven of witches. And there's a bunch of shenanigans that ensue with that. It's not necessarily a scary film, but it's not really trying to be a scary film. It's another film that just is heavy on like mood and atmosphere. It's definitely a product of its time, and I love it for that. I remember it having good music. The ending is great. There's some special effects involved. And it's just a lot of fun. Everything about this movie is fun. Again, it's really iconic. You've seen images from this film before. And yeah, I mean, the less said about it, the better, because this is one, along with The Love Witch and some of these other, like, ones that I definitely think people should go check out if they haven't seen them. So, yeah, I gave it 3.5 stars, so that's a pretty solid score from me. Again, it's not, like, groundbreaking or revolutionary or anything, but it's really great, man. Definitely go check out The Craft. I like it a lot. So that's going to be it for this week's episode. Well, not this week's episode. That's going to be it for this show. I don't know when this is coming out. I don't know if it's coming out during the marathon, after the marathon, or what have you. But yeah, I just wanted to get some practice doing a solo show. I think this one went pretty good. But if you think it went good, let me know down in the comments. Let me know what else you guys want me. See, now I'm flubbing again. I'm flubbing over my words yet again. Let me know what you guys want me to talk about in further solo shows, because I really want to know what you guys want me to talk about on this show. I want to keep the House of Horror podcast going outside of October. I want to keep it a more regular thing, so I'm going to want some content on the show, so whether it be solo shows or having Miles or Jared or my wife or whoever on, I really want to know what you guys want to hear from this show, man, so just let me know. Again, if you're listening to this and it is October, you can expect another video from me tomorrow on the House of Horror. If this comes out after October in November, go back and check it out, man, because I had 31 videos that came out this month. And if this is in October, stick with me for the rest of the month, because I'm going to be having some more stuff coming out. So yeah, there's not too much else to say in this episode, guys. I'm just going to wrap this up. Again, like this video, subscribe to the show, all of that stuff. Follow me on my social media platforms. And I'll catch you guys in the next episode, whenever that happens to be, whether it be tomorrow or in a couple weeks or whatever, depending on when this comes out. So just take care of yourselves, take care of others, stay safe out there, because I'm sure the pandemic is still going on. Wear your masks. Of course, if it's Halloween, you should be wearing a mask anyway, because it's the spooky season, duh. Wear a Halloween mask, man. But yeah, I'll catch you guys down the road in another episode. So as always, you guys, take care and stay spooky.